My father didn't shout my name, he didn't need to. He just stood up in the middle of the auditorium, scraping his chair back so hard it shrieked against the polished floor. Conversation dimmed. The projector light cast him in sharp white as he walked straight toward the stage like he owned the building, the city, and my future. I had just finished presenting my final architecture thesis. 4 years of sleepless nights, design revisions, and models built until my fingers bled, all distilled into 20 minutes. The jury had clapped. My professor had smiled in that rare way that meant you did it. I was still holding the laser pointer when my father reached the front row. He didn't look at the jury, didn't look at my classmates. He looked right at me. "This is what you're proud of?" he said, his voice carrying cleanly through the half-silent auditorium. The microphone on my collar picked it up perfectly. "A pile of cardboard and fake dreams, you wasted our name for this?" A few people gasped. One of the panelists started to stand. Then my father stepped up onto the stage. My body knew this walk. I'd seen it at family dinners, at client meetings, at every moment when something didn't align with his script. Confident, sharp, untouchable. "Dad, you need to sit down," I whispered, the mic still on, my voice echoing across the room. He didn't sit down. He grabbed my presentation board and slammed it onto the floor. The foam core cracked loud as a gunshot. The fragments scattered near my feet. My model, my carefully built, structurally accurate, sustainably designed model, tilted, then crashed off the table, breaking into jagged white pieces. "You don't deserve that distinction," he hissed, jabbing a finger toward the projector where my name still glowed next to the words "Top Thesis Award Elias Carter." "You're a disappointment in a blazer." "That's all," my mother's voice cut through the stunned silence from somewhere in the audience. "We told you, Leo, you should have gone into real estate like your father, not drawing little boxes." Several students shifted uncomfortably. One of my classmates raised their phone, hands shaking, already recording. The jury members looked anywhere but at me. I felt my cheeks burn, my throat close, but my mind didn't. For the first time in my life, everything snapped into sharp, merciless focus. This wasn't the first time they'd tried to break me. It was just the first time they'd done it in front of witnesses. They thought this moment would crush me. They had no idea I'd already taken something from them they might never get back. My name is Leo Carter, and in my family, I was never the architect. I was the mistake they tried to remodel. Growing up, my father liked to say my older brother Mason was built for big things. He got the best schools, the best tutoring, the best introductions at my father's firm. Every meal was a strategy session about his future, his deals, his inevitable success. Me. I was the one who sketched buildings in the margins of receipts because no one bought me sketchbooks. The one who learned angles from how sunlight hit cracked apartment walls when we visited construction sites. The one who was told at 12, "Don't dream too loud, Leo, you distract your brother." When Mason failed his first year of business school, Dad called it a necessary stumble. When I got into the top architecture program in the state on a full merit scholarship, Dad squinted at the acceptance letter and said, "We'll see if you last a year." I lasted all 4. Not because of him. Because of every late shift in the campus cafe, every weekend drafting job I took, every extra credit project I volunteered for when I wanted to sleep but couldn't afford to fall behind. On the morning of my thesis defense, I'd stood in the dorm bathroom mirror, smoothing the borrowed blazer that didn't quite fit my shoulders. The honor cord they'd given me hung heavy around my neck, braided proof I'd done more than survive. I'd almost convinced myself that today, maybe, just maybe, my family would see me. Instead, they decided to expose themselves. And I decided to stop pretending I hadn't seen who they really were a long time ago. Because while my father smashed the physical proof of my work in front of everyone, he didn't know I'd already laid the foundation for something else. Something that didn't have his name on it at all. Security moved fast. "Sir, you need to step away from the stage," one of them said, reaching for my father's arm. Another staff member hurried toward my shattered model, as if they could scoop the pieces back together and pretend nothing happened. My father jerked his shoulder free. "Do you know who I am?" he demanded, voice booming, the microphone on my lapel still capturing every word. "I fund half the projects in this city. I don't need to listen to some." He stopped there, but I knew how the sentence ended in his head. Some second son, some backup plan, some architect who refused to join his empire. The panel chair, Dr. Varga, rose from her seat, eyes blazing in a way I'd never seen. "Mr. Carter," she said, voice calm but sharp as glass, This is an academic evaluation, not a family debate. You are disrupting a formal proceeding. My mother stood up, clutching her handbag like a weapon. You should be thanking us, she snapped. We're the ones who supported him, paid for everything, and this is what we get. A charity project for low-income housing? She spat the last words like they were an insult. The room shifted. People glanced at the screen, still showing renderings of the social housing complex I'd designed: sunlit courtyards, accessible ramps, garden roofs, communal spaces. I'd poured everything I'd learned into that project. Every lecture about equity, every observation from my childhood in neighborhoods my father called bad investments. My heart hammered, but my voice, when it found me, came out strangely steady. You didn't pay for anything, I said, and the microphone delivered the truth to every corner of the room. You haven't paid for a single semester. My mother blinked. My father froze. Around us, a low murmur rose. Phones were out now, not just one, but several. Recording, capturing, witnessing. I looked at the jury, at my classmates, at the broken model at my feet. In fact, I continued, I have printed proof in my bag right now that every tuition payment came from scholarships, grants, and my own work income. The only thing my parents invested in, I swallowed, feeling something inside me harden into place, was my brother's empty ventures, which they've been covering with money that doesn't belong to them. My father's face changed, not to shame, not to regret, to fear. It was small, almost imperceptible, a tightening around his eyes, a slight shift in his jaw as he realized I wasn't going to shrink this time, that I wasn't speaking as the quiet, apologetic son he'd practiced yelling at for years, but as someone with evidence. The panel chair cleared her throat. Leo, she said gently, we can pause. No, I replied. I'd like to finish. I stepped away from my father, away from the shattered board, and turned back to the podium. My hands shook as I picked up my thesis script, but my voice didn't tremble when I began again. This project, I said, gesturing to the now empty stand, was designed for people who are usually shut out of the places they help build. People who clean offices but can't afford to live near their jobs. People whose contributions are invisible until something breaks. I paused. People like the son of a wealthy developer whose family insists they did everything for him when they did nothing. A ripple of sharp, shocked laughter ran through the room. It was small, quickly swallowed, but it was there. I finished my presentation, not because I was calm. I wasn't. Rage and humiliation and an electric kind of clarity flashed through my veins. I finished because I needed this to be on record. When I stepped away from the podium, the room erupted in applause louder than anything I'd imagined. Some of it was for my work, some for the spectacle. Some, I suspected, from the quiet, secret part of everyone who'd ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to lift them up. My father tried to speak again, but this time security didn't hesitate. They guided my parents toward the exit while my brother Mason hunched into his expensive jacket, avoiding eye contact like he could simply vanish. The last thing I saw before the doors closed was my mother's face twisted in fury. You'll regret this, Leo, she shouted. Everything you have came from us. The door swung shut on the lie. An hour later, after a stunned, awkward jury discussion in the hallway, I was handed the envelope confirming what everyone already knew. Top thesis. With distinction, Dr. Varga said, pressing it into my hand. Her eyes softened. And for the record, Mr. Carter, you earned this. No one can take that from you. I nodded, unable to speak. The hallway emptied slowly. Friends asked if I was okay. Professors hovered, unsure how much comfort to offer. Someone showed me the first uploaded clip, my father smashing my model, my mother's voice echoing about wasted money. The caption read, Rich dad ruins son's thesis defense. Then gets exposed on mic. The view count ticked upward. I should have gone home. Instead, I walked across campus, still in my blazer, fingers tightening around the envelope in my pocket, and headed for the one office I'd avoided for months. The community legal clinic. Because my parents weren't the only ones who'd signed something they never expected me to read. The clinic smelled like dust and stale coffee, but the woman at the desk smiled like she'd been waiting for me all day. You're Leo, she asked, standing. I saw the live stream come in. I blinked. The what? She turned her monitor slightly. My father's outburst, my mother's accusations, my quiet correction. It was all there in shaky vertical footage already stitched into a compilation with captions. Underneath, comments flew fast. This kid deserves better. Imagine sabotaging your son's thesis in public. The way he stayed calm, Hugh, I swallowed. I didn't know it spread that far yet. Oh, it has, she said. But that's not why you're here, is it? Her name was Alicia, fourth-year law student. Calm eyes, messy bun, pen that clicked rapidly whenever something didn't add up. I slid a folder across the table. These are copies of any documents my parents ever had me sign, I said. They called it learning the family business. I called it sign whatever's put in front of you or you're ungrateful. I don't know exactly what's in all of them. But one in particular, I pulled out a slightly crumpled set of pages highlighted in yellow. This one, 2 years ago, they said it was just a routine form to put my name on a charity project in case donors had questions. But I remember something about authorization rights and asset management. Alicia's pen stopped clicking. She put on her glasses and read, once, twice. Your father really shouldn't sign legal documents in a hurry, she murmured. This is sloppier than any worst-case exam scenario. My pulse thudded. Is that bad or good for me? For him, she said, bad for you, potentially very, very good. She tapped the third page. This clause here, he names you as temporary co-trustee of the Carter Community Redevelopment Fund in case of incapacitation, conflict of interest, or reputational crisis involving him or Mason. I stared. Co-trustee as in? As in, she said slowly, you share control. And if a reputational crisis appears, say, for instance, a viral video showing him publicly abusing his son in the context of a project branded as community-minded, then a case could be made to limit his authority for the sake of the fund's integrity. I felt the air shift. My father had created that fund to polish his image, tax-deductible gifts, toward affordable housing that mostly ended up in overpriced mixed-use complexes with luxury finishes and 10 affordable units as a footnote. It was also where he quietly funneled money to cover Mason's failed businesses. How much is in it? I asked, throat dry. She opened her laptop, pulled up the public filings, and turned the screen to me. The number made my vision narrow. And you're saying, I whispered, I can't take it, but I can protect it. You can restructure oversight, she said. Require transparent audits, prevent withdrawals unrelated to actual community projects. Separate it from your brother's ventures. You can stop them from using helping people as camouflage for funding their own lives. My heart pounded, half in terror, half in something else. Revenge? I asked, the word tasting strange on my tongue. Alicia shook her head. Accountability, she corrected. Revenge burns everything. Accountability just turns the lights on. I thought about the neighborhoods my father called eyesores. The construction workers who joked about the Carter men never stepping onto scaffolding. The tenants whose leases got mysteriously doubled after the first year. Can we do it? I asked. Move fast before he realizes I know, she studied me. You understand this will blow up whatever's left of your relationship, right? She said. You'll be labeled ungrateful, disloyal. They might try to frame you as unstable or vindictive. I thought of my model smashing on the stage, my mother's voice slicing through my biggest moment. My father saying I owed everything to them in a room full of people who had watched me earn every inch of my future alone. They already think I'm all of that, I said quietly. I just haven't had proof they were wrong. She nodded. All right, Leo, let's pour some concrete under your boundaries. By the time I left the clinic, we'd drafted an action plan, filed the necessary notices, gathered documentation of my father's misuse of the fund, notify the oversight board he'd created as a formality and rarely convened. The phrase reputational crisis appeared a lot. Outside, the evening air felt thin, almost fragile. My phone buzzed constantly, unknown numbers, media requests, classmates sending links, Mason's name popping up with messages like, call dad now. You made a scene? I turned the phone off. At home, in my tiny dorm room that smelled like glue and coffee, I spread out my own proof. Scholarship letters, pay stubs, emails from professors, design competition awards. A paper trail of a life built without them. Above my desk, thumbtacked to the corkboard, hung the first building I'd ever drawn at age 10. A crooked little house with giant windows. On the back, in faint pencil, was a note in my kid handwriting. For people who deserve light. I think I finally know who that includes, I murmured. The next morning, the first piece about my father hit a local news site. By afternoon, it wasn't just local anymore. The headline sat at the top of the national news page like a crack in polished marble. Developer praised for community work caught abusing son at thesis defense scholarships, not family money, paid tuition. Below it, my face mid-flinch. My father's hand drawn back, my mother's mouth open in accusation. The caption mentioned the Carter Community Redevelopment Fund. It also mentioned the clause Alicia had found. I didn't leak that part, but someone had. My inbox turned into a storm. Reporters, strangers, former employees of my father's firm, tenants from his properties, architecture students from other cities. Every message carried some variation of the same quiet confession. I know what it's like when they try to own your future because they bankrolled your past. In the middle of the chaos, one email stood out. Subject: your design, your composure, our offer. The logo at the top was from a firm I'd followed obsessively for years. Studio Meridian, known for actually building what brochures promised. Adaptive reuse, inclusive housing, schools that didn't look like prisons. Leo, the message read, we watched the video, then we watched the recorded version of your thesis presentation. Our alum on the jury sent it. We're not reaching out because of the drama. We're reaching out because, under that pressure, your work and your voice stayed clear. We have an opening in our Urban Futures Fellowship in Portland. It includes relocation, salary, and leadership on a community housing project not unlike your thesis. Only this time, we'd like to pay you to build it. If you're interested, let's talk. We think you're exactly the kind of architect this field needs. I stared at the screen so long my eyes watered. Portland, a city where my father had no projects. Where the Carter name wouldn't open doors or slam them in my face. Where I could design buildings without feeling like I was constantly drafting arguments for my own existence. My phone buzzed, dragging me back. Dad. I let it ring until it cut off, then my mother, then Mason, then finally a number labeled Office Carter Properties HQ. I answered that one. Leo, my father's voice snapped immediately, no greeting. You've had your tantrum. Now you're going to fix it. You'll call those reporters and tell them it was a misunderstanding from a tough love family moment. You'll say the scholarship story was exaggerated and that. No, I said. The silence on the other end was almost funny. No, he repeated slowly as if he'd never heard the word before. No, I said again. I'm not retracting the truth and I'm not your PR intern. You ungrateful, he began, voice rising, but I cut him off. There's something else, I said. I've filed paperwork as co-trustee of the Community Redevelopment Fund. Your little emergency clause, the one you added in case you needed a scapegoat? I could practically hear him rifling through his memory. You signed it, I continued. Which means until your reputational crisis is resolved, and considering the current headlines, that won't be soon, you can't move a cent from that fund without my approval. He went dead quiet. Leo, he said finally, voice low, dangerous. You don't understand what you're playing with? I understand perfectly, I replied. That money was supposed to be for housing projects, remember? Not for Mason's third startup or your vacations disguised as site visits. I'm not taking it. I'm just making sure it goes where it was always supposed to go. You're destroying your family, he hissed. I looked around my tiny room at the boxes of models, the stack of ramen cups, the one plant I kept forgetting to water. You destroyed it, I said softly, when you decided my humiliation was more important than my work. He scoffed. Fine, you want to be a martyr? Go ahead, but when the dust settles, you'll come crawling back. You'll realize you're nothing without my name on your buildings. I thought of the email from Studio Meridian. I already have another name on the table, I said. Mine? He hung up without saying goodbye. I stared at my reflection in the dark laptop screen, the faint bruise of old hurt under my new certainty. That night I filmed a video. Not angry, not shaking, just me sitting at my cluttered desk, the broken pieces of my thesis model piled in the background like a skyline that had survived an earthquake. Hi, I began. I'm Leo. A lot of you saw my worst moment on a stranger's phone yesterday. I wanted to show you what came before it and what's coming after. I explained the scholarships, the self-funded education, the clinic, the clause, the fund. I blurred some names, clarified others. I'm not taking my family's money, I said. I'm taking away their ability to misuse the money they claimed was for helping the community. I won't spend a cent of it. But I will make sure it finally does what they told you it was doing all along. I paused. I'm not telling you this so you'll hate them, I added. I'm telling you this so you'll understand. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep your family's lies warm. I ended the video with a simple line. Buildings don't become safe just because someone rich says they are, neither do families. I hit upload. Then I opened a new email draft to Studio Meridian and typed 2 words. I'm in. As the video views climbed and the fellowship paperwork landed in my inbox, the life my parents designed for me, quiet sun in the corner of their empire, cracked wide open. In the space where their blueprint used to be, something new began to rise. And I was the one drawing it, line by line. My suitcase was still half-zipped when the door to my dorm swung open without a knock. Mason stood there, his tie crooked, his hair a mess, his eyes red in that particular shade of panic he would never admit to. For a moment, we just stared at each other in the weak yellow corridor light. You're leaving? He said, like the idea offended him personally. Yes, I replied, zipping the suitcase the rest of the way. I got a fellowship? At Meridian, he muttered. Dad's been raging about it for hours. He said you're trying to ruin everything. I rolled the suitcase upright. Dad ruined everything when he smashed my work in front of 100 people. Mason flinched. That video, Leo, it looks exactly like what happened. He stuffed his hands into his pockets, looking suddenly small. You blindsided him. I laughed once, sharp, disbelieving. I blindsided him. Mason, Dad stormed a stage and broke my thesis. He humiliated me before I could even speak. He said you embarrassed him, Mason insisted weakly. Of course he did, I snapped. Everything is always about him. Silence stretched between us. Then Mason exhaled shakily. Look, you know about the fund, he knows you know, and he's furious. He thinks you're going to expose all of it. I already exposed part of it, I said. The rest will come out through audits. Legally, he scrubbed a hand over his face. Do you know what happens if that fund freezes? My startup is using it as collateral. Dad said he'd cover the payments this quarter. My stomach turned cold. Collateral, I said. Mason, that's illegal. He didn't deny it. He promised me, Mason whispered. He said if I lost investors again, he'd keep the fund open until I recovered. I stared at him. This wasn't the golden child. This was a boy drowning in promises Dad had never intended to keep. Mason wasn't innocent. He'd benefited, neglected me, parroted our parents, but he wasn't the architect of the mess either. You're asking me to undo everything, I said slowly. I'm asking you, he said, voice trembling, not to destroy me just because you're finally strong enough to destroy him. He wasn't crying, but the cracks were there. Mason, I said quietly, I'm not destroying anyone. I'm putting the fund where it belongs, into real community projects. Not your ventures, not Dad's PR stunts. He swallowed. Then where does that leave me? I stepped closer. Exactly where I've been my whole life, I said softly. On your own. His breath hitched. You're really leaving, he whispered. Yes. You're really choosing strangers over your family, I shook my head. I'm choosing myself for once. His shoulders sagged. I hope, I added, that one day you choose yourself too, not Dad's version of you, not his money, not his expectations. He looked at me as if seeing someone he'd never bothered to understand. Then he stepped aside. As I rolled the suitcase past him, he said, barely audible, "Good luck, Leo." I didn't turn back. For the first time in my life, I didn't need permission to walk away. Portland smelled like rain and cedar and possibility. Studio Meridian's office was a renovated warehouse, the kind with brick walls and giant windows that made every corner feel like a sketch waiting to be filled. My new team greeted me with warm smiles, not calculated politeness. They didn't care about my last name. They cared that I could build. On my first morning, the creative director, Sienna, led me through the open floor plan. We're excited about what you can bring, she said, waving her hand toward an enormous wall of pinned concept sketches. Your thesis, the community center design, that vision aligns perfectly with our upcoming East Harbor project. I felt the strange warmth of being seen without being compared. And she added, lowering her voice, we saw the video, not the viral one, the recording of your actual presentation. You kept going, Leo, not many people could have. My chest tightened. I didn't feel strong. That's the point, she said. Strength isn't loud. For days, I threw myself into work, drafting models, engaging with community reps. Visiting the East Harbor site, a cracked asphalt stretch that smelled like rust but felt like a promise. Meanwhile, my family spiraled. Journalists dug into the fund's history. Anonymous tips flooded my inbox. Former employees came forward about backdoor deals. A tenant association filed a complaint. My father issued a statement calling the video misleading, then a second statement blaming stress, then a third implying I'd struggled emotionally for years. Classic reversal. I ignored all of it. Until one evening, Sienna handed me an envelope. "This came to the office," she said, "from a Carter Properties courier." My stomach clenched. Inside was a letter written in my mother's looping handwriting. "Leo, your father is very sick. He wants to see you. Come home so we can fix this." Mom, no details, no apology, no acknowledgement, just a lure dressed as concern. Sienna's eyes softened. "You don't have to go." "I know," I said. But part of me wondered what game they were playing now. That night, I sat in my tiny Portland apartment, staring at the lights reflecting on the river. Did I owe them one final conversation? Did I owe myself closure? Or was this just another hook disguised as a lifeline? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "He's not actually sick." A neighbor. I stared at the screen. My ribs tightened. And the next morning, I booked a flight anyway. Not for them, for the boy I had once been, the one who always waited at the door for a family that never came. Their house felt smaller than I remembered, or maybe I had grown. My mother opened the door, her smile stretched thin like aging wallpaper. "Leo," she breathed, reaching for my arm. I stepped back. "I want to see him," I said. She led me into the living room where my father sat in an armchair, dramatically wrapped in a blanket, a humidifier puffing beside him. He looked healthy, he looked annoyed. "Leo," he said, as if my name tasted sour. "Sit." I didn't. Mom perched on the sofa edge. "Your father's been unwell, the stress you caused." I laughed once and her face twitched. Dad sighed. "We need to settle this, you're making the family look bad." "You did that," I said, his jaw tightened. "That video, that assault," I corrected. He glared. "You provoked me?" "No," I said, "you exposed yourself." His blanket slipped slightly as he leaned forward. "You are going to restore my authority over the fund. You are going to retract your statements, and you are going to stop embarrassing us publicly. And if I don't," his expression sharpened. "We'll disown you," Mom whispered dramatically as if the words were nuclear. "You already did," I said quietly. "Years ago." My father slammed his palm on the armrest. "You think you can survive without this family?" I breathed slowly. "I already am," he scoffed. "That fellowship won't last. Firms hate scandal. The scandal is yours, not mine. You're a Carter," he growled. "Everything you do reflects on us." "Not anymore," I said. "I'm legally changing my name next month." Mom gasped. Dad went red. "You ungrateful?" "No," I said softly, the word a blade slicing clean through decades of rot. "You don't get to name me anymore." They stared, stunned. Then I pulled a folder from my bag. Inside were audit findings, misuse documentation. Leon records evidence of collateralized loans. I set it on the table. "You will face consequences," I said. "Not from me, from your own paperwork." Mom trembled. You're destroying your family's legacy." I met her eyes. "I'm saving the only part worth saving, the community projects. The homes, the people you used as decoration." My father's voice dropped to a venomous whisper. "You'll regret this?" "Maybe," I said, "but not as much as I regret ever believing you'd be proud of me." I stood. And for the first time in that house, no one told me to sit down. The fallout hit fast. Within a week, the oversight board removed my father from his position. Construction permits tied to shady deals were frozen. Mason's startup defaulted. A regulatory investigation opened. Tenants rallied for safer housing conditions. And the fund, protected now by the new trustees Alicia helped appoint, shifted toward real projects. My father blamed me publicly. My mother sobbed on local TV. Mason sent a single text, "You could have saved us. You chose not to." I typed a reply, deleted it. Typed another, deleted that too, because the truth was complicated. No, I didn't save them. But I did save 100 families who were about to lose their homes. And myself. Studio Meridian flew me back for a conference 2 months later. We presented early sketches of the East Harbor redevelopment, a project now partly funded by the restructured Carter Community Fund. Dad's money was finally doing what he'd only pretended it did. After the presentation, strangers approached me with stories of their own: a daughter whose parents never celebrated her achievements, a son who was beaten down for choosing art over medicine, a young architect who whispered, "Watching you walk away made me apply here." Every story stitched strength back into places my family had once hollowed. That night, alone in my hotel room overlooking the river, I let myself feel everything: the grief, the rage, the relief, the quiet, steady pride. I didn't rise loudly. I rose like concrete being poured, slow, deliberate, unshakable. Until my phone rang again. But this time, it was a number I didn't expect: a federal investigator. "We need clarification," she said. "On a few documents your brother submitted, he listed you as a partner in his startup. Did you sign these?" My blood ran cold. "I didn't sign anything," I whispered. Her voice tightened. "Then we have a forgery." The room spun. Mason had used my name, my signature, my identity to secure a loan, to cover a debt. To save himself, part of me wanted to scream. Another part expected nothing less. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "Your testimony," she said, "and your decision on whether to press charges." My heart splintered. Mason had chosen Dad's pattern, and I had to choose something else. I didn't press charges, not because I forgave him, because I refused to let our family's legacy of punishment dictate my future. But I did give a statement. A clear one. Mason lost access to business accounts. He was barred from financial management for 5 years. The state required him to take ethics training. And he finally saw a consequence that didn't land on someone else's shoulders. He texted me once, "I hate you. But I understand you." I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on what I could build. Months passed. The East Harbor project broke ground, clean, loud, hopeful. Children watched from the sidewalk as excavators carved the first lines of what would become a community center with green roofs and affordable units. My name, my new name, would be on the plaque as lead designer, not because of my family, because I earned it. One evening, after a long day on site, I stood on the unfinished rooftop and watched the city glow. Sienna joined me. "You ever think about going back?" she asked softly. "No," I said then after a beat. "Not to stay." "What about closure?" I exhaled. "Closure is a door I close myself, not one they open." She smiled. "Good. Because you've built more in 9 months than they did in 9 years." The wind lifted my hair. For once, I didn't shrink against it. Later that night, I received a message request on social media. It was from a student, a teenager from a low-income neighborhood. He wrote, "I didn't know people like us could build things that change cities. Your story showed me we can." I stared at the words until my eyes blurred. Not from pain this time, from purpose. I typed back, "You can. Start anywhere, even in the shadows." And as the East Harbor lights flickered on behind me, illuminating steel beams rising into a skyline that didn't know my family's name but was beginning to learn mine, I finally understood. I never needed their approval, I only needed space to grow. And I had built that space myself. Line by line, brick by brick, future by future, a life designed by my own hands.